Good evening and welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, October 18th, and we are beginning at 7:13. If you're watching at home, we had an in-camera session before that took a little longer, but we are ready to roll now. We have no public hearing tonight, and we have no public comments, as far as I know, Jonathan, sorry. Oh, sorry, thank you. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. You had mentioned that we had a few motions that came out of the closed meeting session. So I would move that Council direct administration to take over the full management and administration of the Catholic section of the Strathmore Cemetery.
You've all heard the motion. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Wiley.
Sure. I'm going to be supporting this motion. It's a very complex issue. It involves multiple partners. It dates back to 1975. But in it, our administration has come up with a fair and reasonable solution that respects all taxpayers, both Catholic and non-Catholic alike. So I'm very pleased with the setup here.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And the motion is carried. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that Council direct administration to work with legal counsel to develop bylaws for a society to govern Bayside Affordable Housing Program moving forward, and that Council further direct administration to return to a subsequent council meeting with a copy of the draft bylaws for the society prior to incorporation. And finally, that Council rescind bylaw number 392-10-20.
Thank you. And for the minutes, that should be resolution number 392-10-20. That's okay. Do we have that, Jonathan? Are you with me on that? Okay. Any discussion on that? All in favor? And then I think we have one more. This one right here. Yep.
And Your Worship, I would move that Council direct administration to explore amenity synergies with Golden Hills School Division and Christ the Redeemer School Division? No, with Golden Hills School Division, sorry, and that $10,000 be used from the Financial Stabilization Fund for evaluating opportunities.
Thank you. You've all heard that motion. All in favor? Oh, Councillor Wiley, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important that we all, and myself, recognize that something that benefits Golden Hills School Division also benefits all the residents of town. Any synergies that could come up could be a win-win situation for all of us. I'm just really hopeful that our administration also reaches out to Christ the Redeemer.
Thank you. Those are good points, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Peterson.
Yes, and I just want to follow up that we know that that is an opportunity that our senior leadership team will take advantage of, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? That motion is carried. We have no public hearings.
Excuse me, Mayor. We'll need a motion to continue the in-camera after the public meeting as well, so Jonathan can help with that.
Oh, right. Sorry. I did see that.
I think I'm ready with it.
Councillor Wiley?
The council defer discussion on agenda item, I think it was 3.4, to after correspondence on the regular council meeting agenda, creating a second closed meeting section for the discussion becoming item 13.1.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Wiley. All in favor? And that motion is carried. I'm good now? We have no public hearing tonight, and there are no public comments, unless they call to complain about me now. We have no delegations tonight, and that brings us to 7, consent agenda. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move the council adopt the recommendations of the following agenda reports by an omnibus motion: 8.1, 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, and 12.1.
And I guess I should have asked, are there any items on the consent agenda that one of the councillors would like to see put on the public one? Councillor Langmaid?
Maybe not necessarily moved off the consent agenda, but just a question regarding the regular council meeting minutes from last week. or the regular council meeting minutes from October 4th. I noticed that after our first in-camera session early in the evening, there was no motion included to actually remove us from in-camera. Was that something that we just, an oversight, or?
That was the first in-camera section, sorry?
Yes, I believe so. At the very beginning of the meeting, we have a motion going in, but not a motion bringing us out.
So I think we might need to pull that off the consent agenda then and just make a motion to amend the minutes to include that motion.
All right.
Is that
So
council?
you're taking off 8.1 then, Councillor Langmaid? Oh. Okay, but so there's nothing taken off the consent agenda then? All right, so you've heard Councillor Montgomery's motion,
Well, no, wait, I'd like to remove 9.4.
9.4.
So I offer an amendment to the motion to remove 9.4.
Any discussion on that amendment to the motion?
While it's being amended, you just want to add and to make the correction on 8.1 as well?
Actually, please forgive me. I just found in the minutes where it's noted, and I misread it and missed the motion coming out. So there is no mistake, and I'd like to take back what I said, because it was a misreading by me, and Jonathan, I apologize.
Luckily, there's editing software on this Zoom video.
Okay, so we have a motion to remove 9.4 from the consent agenda. Yes, we have to vote on his amendment first. All in favor of the amendment? Okay. And then we have a motion. Do we need a new motion then, Jonathan, to? Okay. All right, thank you. So, yeah, on the original motion of Councillor Montgomery, all in favor? As amended. Yes. Thank you. That brings us to item 8. That's done. 9, we go now to 9.4. Seniors Property Tax Rebate Program, policy number 5103. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. Last week at COTW, I presented on the Senior Property Tax Rebate Program, policy number 5103. The presentation was to inform you of the policy edits that were suggested by administration and to bring the policy in line with reference to the income thresholds as set out by the Government of Alberta Special Needs Assistance for Seniors, Section 4.1, and to remove the threshold table from 2019. In your council package is a revised and final iteration of the policy. If you have reviewed and have any further questions, I'd be happy to take those questions now.
Any questions for Bud?
I don't have a question.
Oh,
but
Councillor Wiley.
I have a motion. As I said last week in the Committee of the Whole, I'm going to move that council rescind Seniors Property Tax Rebate Program policy number 5103, and I'm prepared to speak on the motion.
Sure, please do.
Sure. So property taxes are a burden for everyone, like everyone. Everyone I know is making significant sacrifices in their lives in order to pay for the rising cost of living. And when I say significant, I'm not just talking about canceling their Disney Plus subscriptions. I'm talking about people making decisions on what groceries to buy. Their children aren't in the programs that they were in. I'm talking about extreme situations like the story I gave last week of a family on my street that was renting that is now living in a trailer with 4 children. So I'm talking about significant burdens on all taxpayers. Anywhere that I see an opportunity to cut taxes, to cut that burden from our taxpayers, I'm going to seriously look at. And this is one that the small amount of property tax rebate that these seniors are going to receive is enough that we would all be sharing the very, very heavy tax burden. So I'm definitely in favor of rescinding this.
Thank you for that motion. We have a motion on the floor. Discussion on that motion, Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. So I've spoken on this before, and I certainly agree with Councillor Wiley. Everyone is suffering greatly in this environment. I think that to our director's point, that this is a threshold program, so seniors have to meet a specific threshold for eligibility. And when you couple that eligibility, which is $27,000, I think, approximately, like in that realm for a single, you're talking about people living on a very, very low fixed income. Seniors have no capacity, or a lot of seniors, not all seniors, but many seniors, particularly in the aged group of seniors, do not have earning capacity like their younger counterparts. And not to say that the younger counterparts aren't suffering, because I know that they are. But the reality of seniors is that they often have no capacity to earn additional income, no capacity to seek additional income, that the benefits that they do receive are taxable, and rebates can offset that tax burden as well as make a huge difference. And while Councillor Wiley articulated, it's a very small amount. And so while it may seem like a very small amount in the context of the budgets that we deal with, or the costs that people are facing in their living to seniors, they have articulated repeatedly that these are extremely important and very helpful benefits, because the rebates offset costs of those increased medical expenses that the huge majority of seniors face. So I think that the other thing, and the final thing that it does, is it speaks to our strategy around community wellness. And it is one of many things that this council and community, particularly through our FCSS, do to ensure that community wellness is something that we focus on in every sector. And in doing that, we recognize contributions of seniors who have paid taxes for sometimes up to 50 and 60 years or beyond to support other people in this community, and that they have done that due diligence. And it is a recognition of their contributions to society over multiple decades in terms of community building. So I think it's important to note that a small rebate that has huge meaning to seniors still has viability in this community. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Bud. Could you refresh my memory as to how many people this might involve?
Yeah, I can go back from 2019 all the way to 2023 currently. In terms of overall client support, in 2019, we facilitated 132 seniors. In 2020, 92 seniors. In 2021, 117 seniors. 2022, 66 seniors. And to date, the program closing at the end of November, 61 seniors.
Thank you. I will be voting against the motion, because I do like the idea of supporting seniors who are in very vulnerable positions. And I think the points Councillor Peterson made about maybe not being healthy or strong enough to get extra work, or because of health issues they're not able to, and price of medications and everything, I think the rebate program is something that's very helpful to a very vulnerable population, and not a large number as far as how the town deals with it. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. Bud, when you say, like, say 61 seniors, do you mean like is that 61 households, or is that actually 61 people?
61 total people, yes. So depending on the application, it could be a household of one or a single senior of one.
Okay. Okay. So Councillor Wiley, I hear what you're saying. I mean, when I hear, there's a family of four, living in a tent, as you said last time, and now in a trailer. I mean, that's horrific. I mean, that being said, I wouldn't want to see a senior living in a tent or a trailer either. Something that I think this program is missing, to be honest, is I think there should be a cap on the value of somebody's home that we actually let qualify for this. Because if somebody's sitting in a $500,000 home, they should sell that, and they should probably use their own money to kind of, pay for their own living. If somebody's living in like, a $200,000, that's a bit different, but, or if, somebody's living in a $750,000 house. So, yeah, I guess I'll leave my comments for the next motion. Thank you.
But is there an income threshold on this? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so,
So for
I'm
2023, the
confused.
current income threshold for a single is $29,630.
okay,
And then for a couple, it's $48,120.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion on the Councillor Wiley's motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion is defeated. And now, is any councillor prepared to make the motion concerning this rebate policy number 5103 on page 103? Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So I will move that council adopt the amended senior property tax rebate program, policy number 5103 as presented in attachment 1, and that council direct administration to bring back a report regarding the idea of implementing a cap on the property values that we will entertain the rebate for. And I guess I'll speak to that. So, I think it's, obviously focusing on somebody's income is important, but there are a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are people out there who, like make small incomes but sit on large assets. And I don't think that's right, to be honest. And to Councillor Wiley's point, and I raised this last week, it's kind of a strange, and I guess, I'll kind of speak to Councillor Peterson's points too. Like people in the past have certainly paid taxes. And a lot of those taxes get used up in the kind of the year that they're paid, essentially. And when we look at like the debt that various governments hold, it's clear that taxpayers of the past have not necessarily paid, the full amount of what needed to be paid, because obviously we're paying off debt from decades ago, all of us. So I think it's reasonable. I think it's reasonable to try to help people in our community. I mean, like, I don't necessarily like the idea of using government to do that all the time. And I think it's also reasonable that, if we're going to be looking at somebody's income, we should also be looking, to determine if they qualify. We should also be looking at, the value of the assets that they're sitting on, because as I mentioned last time, we as a country, we as a province, and even as a community, we spend money to keep seniors in their homes, beyond, I'll say, their natural, in the past, people would have to, downsize, they would have to, kind of liquidate their assets to pay for their retirement, and that would, basically circulate or cycle the properties or the homes, and that would free up homes for, say, a family to move into. It doesn't make a lot of sense when, say a single senior is living in a single family home, like a 3-bedroom home or something like that by themselves, when they could be living, more easily in something like a condo or something like that. And then, so for all of us to kind of fund somebody to stay in their home, and then, to have that person pass on, and then a whole asset, essentially like a house, gets, passed on to the children of that person, that has passed on, and, and that those kids, or, kid maybe, gets basically handed a whole asset, rather than, them having to pay for their parents' retirement, or, their parents' old age. It's the rest of us paying for it so they can be handed a complete asset. And so I don't think that's right necessarily either. And so, government is unfortunately, one of the negative unintended consequences of things like this is that we distort markets, we distort, the natural cycle of things when we step in and interfere. And so, to make a long speech long, I think it's reasonable that we, do this program, but I think it's also reasonable that we look to the future as far as considering assets. Thank you.
I think it would be kind of dangerous to get involved in what people do with their own private property that they've worked for years to finally pay off and own, and then how they want to distribute that. I'm not sure we should be getting involved in anything like this. I also thought there was a cost advantage that the province has talked about as far as being able to keep seniors in their homes longer versus going into seniors' housing. So there's that to consider too. And the other thing I'm really confused about is I guess I'm not sure how someone on a low income would sit on a $500,000 property. How does that happen? They've just, like, would that be how are you paying property tax on a $500,000 home if you're at the low enough threshold to qualify for this one-time grant per year? I don't see how you could afford to pay property taxes in the first place if you're on a very expensive property. So I will not be supporting this motion. And I'll go to other councillors. I have Councillor Langmaid and then Councillor Montgomery again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand some of the concerns that have been discussed tonight, but I want to make it clear that my intention tonight is to support the senior property tax rebate program. However, the program is already means tested. There's already a means test involved in ensuring that only certain people can enroll, and you're demonstrating a need for that grant. An additional means test in looking at the value of a property, which can be impacted by a number of things. I'm not sure, given the number of enrollees that we have in this program, and that it seems to be consistently declining, I'm not sure that it's worth the administration's effort to go through and try and match names to property titles and determine what the value of that property is. And I'm also cognizant of, that a senior could and possibly always sell their home to have some income, but then what? Where do they go? They have this home, they have some income now, but there's not a lot of, if you're looking at a property to downsize to, there's not a lot available right now, and the prices are not necessarily affordable. So that money that they might gain from selling their current home might not stretch as far as we hope, as far as they might hope it would. And additionally, the other thing that I'm cognizant of is the homes of seniors, not seniors' homes, but the homes of seniors are not necessarily always just home to seniors, especially right now in the housing crunch that we have. I know a lot of my peers have had to make that really awkward decision at this age to move back in with their parents because things are unaffordable. So you're not only potentially displacing one senior who might struggle to find additional, smaller housing, you might also be displacing their family. And so it's kind of a knock-on too. So if this program was larger, had a larger enrollment, had a larger impact on the budget, then I might consider that a little more closely. But given the scope of the program that we're considering today, I'm not sure that that the addition of multiple means tests is really a benefit in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So with regards to, I guess, your comment, Mr. Mayor, about not wanting to dictate to people how they use their assets, presumably we're running this program because people are in a position where if we didn't provide this assistance, they would get into some sort of trouble and would need to liquidate their assets. So we are, by running this program, essentially distorting, as I mentioned before, we're causing a distortion in the natural cycle of things by running this program, and we are essentially giving somebody the ability to pass on an asset to their kids. So we are affecting things, and by not running the program and, you know, and letting the natural course of things happen, that wouldn't be us doing that. That would be just the way things always have been and are. Is this program intended for people like a senior who has like a family living with them?
Mic on? Oh, there we go. It's intended for basically anyone with the income thresholds that are in a dwelling, if they're single, no spouse, and they have a different income threshold, then we apply the criteria to that. And if they're a couple, then we apply we apply the income of the household to the criteria as well. We don't know who has additional residence within the home at this time. We don't ask those questions. We just basically ask of the senior who occupy the home, own title on the home, and then their level of income.
Okay, but I mean, like, we're not really kind of anticipating that, you know, like we're giving this senior some money and then, you know, they have like a family of 5 living with them or something like that.
That's an unknown for us.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, you know, as much as I you know, it's one of those things where I'm torn. You know, I do support obviously helping seniors. You know, I usually help seniors kind of using my own kind of personal means, not the means of other people, but yeah. I'll just say I think it's reasonable to, you know, I've said this before. I think we all need to be careful about, you know, it's great to have intended consequences, you know, like, which, you know, in theory, I guess we are intending to allow people to stay in their homes by running this program. And do we, you know, I've mentioned this so many times, but, you know, the unintended negative consequences of our actions, do we ever think about those? You know, Councillor Wiley raised the fact that, you know, again, there's families with children who are essentially homeless, and that is absolutely horrible. You know, and I guess I'm not gonna, you know, if a senior is sitting on a $500,000 house, okay, and it's paid off, they could easily sell that and go and buy a $250,000 condo where, you know, all of their, you know, shoveling and mowing is done for them. Then they would have $250,000 cash. They would no longer be, you know, struggling to get by. They would have more than enough money. So I'm not, you know, I was against Councillor Wiley's motion before to terminate this program, but yeah, I guess, you know, I will, I guess we can go ahead with the vote, I guess, but when people are done, but I'll bring forward the idea again of capping this. Thank you.
Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Mitzner.
Thank you, Worship. I think that when we talk about seniors and housing, you know, that there is a respectful understanding that like all people, seniors have attachment, as Councillor Langmaid said. They have more than just the asset management piece. There's also deep emotional attachment to their home, their community, where they live, their neighbors. And so, you know, telling someone they need to sell their home is possibly somewhat out of context. And I think that we should be really clear that this rebate is not going to keep anybody in their home. It is not going to keep anyone in their home. It is simply set up to provide relief to people who find themselves in a very low income threshold. I would support possibly this motion if it was separated. I won't support it in its current form. I do definitely support the senior property tax rebate program. I don't support the second half of the motion. Because as Councillor Langmaid pointed out, there is mean testing, and we could, I guess, although it would cost us probably more than the rebate program itself, go into looking at means testing based on income and assets other than the primary residence. We could do that, but it will cost us more than the rebate program is costing us. So I think that decisions regarding tax rebates for seniors, we've discussed them endlessly behind this table. We know what the advantages are. And I also think that when Councillor Montgomery talks about the natural cycle of things and disrupting markets, you know, we don't live in a purely capitalistic society in any stretch of the imagination, because we live in a social democratic economy across the board. And if we want to talk about disrupting natural cycles, then you either should or should not take your medication, because either way, it may disrupt a cycle. And so I don't think that that's a logical argument in terms of talking about giving a small rebate to a very needy identified group for a very specific purpose. And beyond that, Your Worship, I would just have to say that I can't support the motion in its current form.
Thank you. Councillor Mitzner?
I kind of have a two-part question. So is this a Town of Strathmore specific policy, or is this a government rebate program?
This is a town policy that was approved by a previous council, from my understanding.
Okay, second question, the rebate, does it go directly to the taxes, or does it go to the people after they pay their taxes?
Their taxes are paid before the deadline of June 30th, and the program kicks in based on their income and their request for income support through identifying their household income, and then the rebate program is provided back to them in a form of a check payment.
So their taxes would have to be paid in full prior to the small rebate?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. This will be my final comments. So as part of running this program, you guys make sure that the person applying is a property owner, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you know their address, you probably? Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so I mean, like, it's, I mean, like, you know, we're already 2/3 of the way there, is finding out what their, you know, their property is worth. I'm certainly not suggesting that we, you know, start going into people's bank accounts or, you know, into, you know, kind of turning them upside down and shaking them to see what falls out of their pockets. I'm just simply saying we could, you know, just kind of look one column over on the spreadsheet and say, hey, look, that house is worth $800,000. Maybe, you know, maybe we don't give that person, you know, the few $100 or whatever off. The other thing I'll point out is that there's a big difference between obviously somebody personally deciding to take medication, you know, to, you know, resolve whatever health issues they have, versus the government, you know, stepping in and making everybody take medication or other things like that. So what I'm referring to specifically is the government. When the government steps in and acts, that's where it causes distortions of the market. That's why we see, you know, the housing cost problems that we do nowadays. That's why we see the inflation we do nowadays. It's all because of distortion caused by government action. And that's why I always say we need to be careful about what we're doing and what we're causing, because this program, and if we're not running this program to keep people in their homes, you know, if we're just putting a little bit of spending money in their pocket, then I'm not sure why why would we be doing? You know, I plan on voting for the program because I believe it's keeping somebody in their home, even though I've kind of spoken against that. But I don't know. Thank you.
Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to ask one question of clarification. On that theoretical spreadsheet where there's someone's name, someone's address, and then you'd go over one more column and theoretically see the value of their home, that would be the assessed value for tax purposes, not the market value as determined by a realtor. So is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct, Council.
So in order to be able to assess the actual value of someone's home on the market, we would need to hire a real estate agent to do assessments of each of those homes to get the market value. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Oh yeah, that's too much effort for my good. Thank you.
Councillor Montgomery?
So when the town is deciding to tax somebody and how much to tax somebody, do we get like a real estate agent to give us an assessment on a property so that we can figure out how much to tax them? Or do we just use our own assessment values that we've come up with ourselves?
We would,
Deanna?
We have hired an external assessment company that prepares our assessment for the entire town. We can use their annual assessment on every property that is being applied for against, and it's an unbiased, and it's a market value, or it's a percentage of the market value. It's based on sales in that area. I believe it would be impartial. I would recommend if we were going to use assessed values, we would use our assessor's assessed value.
That would obviously make a lot more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone need to hear Councillor Montgomery's motion read again? Any councillors confused or anything? Okay, then I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? The motion is carried, and I'm even more confused. Motion is defeated, sorry. That's why I'm confused. Okay, Councillor Peterson.
You go. Sorry. Thank you, Worship. I'm ready with a motion that council adopt the amended senior property tax rebate program policy number 5103 as presented in attachment 1.
Any further discussion on that motion? He said hopefully. All in favor? And opposed? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much, Bud and Liana.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
We
Have a
move
good
now
evening.
to item 10, bylaws, 10.1 bylaw number 23-31. Councillor Peterson? Oh, sorry, we have Donna here, sorry.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I will not be as long as I was last time, I promise. So I brought back the bylaw with the changes. I heard your comments and your questions, and I think for the most part, I've addressed most of them in here. I'll just go through them really quick, what we've done here. So we added some definitions of adult, child, infant, resident, and encompassed Wheatland County and the town of Strathmore as a service area. Remove 6.2C as that wasn't needed. We don't have a contract in place with people who are being interred in the cemetery. And we addressed about record keeping when and if we remove memorial items, and that is in 9.7. One part that we didn't include in the bylaw, and the reason being is about the term of memorial items. We didn't include that, and the reason being is it would be really difficult to administer a burial and keeping track of who's got what, and felt that it would, I mean, the items listed in there, the reason they're in there is because they're safety items, and it was really hard to come up with some things that would be allowed as a memorial item without it becoming a safety issue. So we did not include that. And then with regards to sale of plots, we added a cap of, and this gives the town the right to refuse. So it doesn't mean it's an outright cap, but we have the opportunity that if somebody, like I mentioned in the last council meeting, if somebody did want to buy 100 plots, that we do have the right to refuse and say no to that. But this also enables that if family does come in and they've got 10, 15 members that did want to buy, that we could absolutely still sell them those burial plots. And then the last thing that we updated was the transfer of a vacant plot. So now this has allowed us that if, I'll just use an example, if grandma bought a plot, but maybe the daughter is passing away and she wants to transfer that plot to her, she could. So that enables that to happen as well. I think addressed all the questions from the last council meeting. And so I'm looking for some readings tonight, hopefully.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley?
Sure. So I've had some time to read this and process this. So I'm actually going to move the council direct administration to bring bylaw number 2331 back to a future committee of the whole meeting for further discussion. And I'm prepared to speak on that motion. Okay. So again, just in case you missed, I'm just asking we see this again at a committee of the whole. The reason why is, well, a few weeks ago I was getting my hair cut. And I had this really cool barber. He was this hipster kind of guy, maybe a little bohemian. And I asked him, what are you up to this winter? And he said, oh, he's going on vacation. He's going to Mexico. Oh, where in Mexico? A graveyard. Now, okay, not my destination in Mexico, but that was clearly his. And the reason is the culture. And there's a special day of the year that they all go they all go down. And there's lights and there's flowers and there's culture. And I was thinking about this bylaw, and I was thinking about in Paris, people go to graveyards. These are interesting places. And then there's our bylaw. And I think what it's doing when it continues to rattle uniformity, that's boring. And so I think I'm philosophically opposed to the direction that this is taking. It's not a huge thing I need changed, but I want to, in a committee of the whole, have some time to go through some of the items on here and talk more to administration, now that I've had time to think about it, talk more to administration about, is that really what we want and why? Like Donna says, there is safety concerns. I'm totally prepared to look at those, but I'm just not prepared to move forward with this bylaw tonight until we've had a chance to a council where we beat the drum of diversity, and then in our cemetery, it's going to be uniformity. I'd like to have another chance to talk about it.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Montgomery.
Councillor Wiley, I hate your motion, but I love your idea. It's a fabulous idea. And I want to tell you, you probably don't have rows in your classroom anymore either, right? But I think that our graveyard is not boring. And the reason I know this is because as a social studies teacher for years in this town, my students had to do tours of the graveyard. And because it is filled with the most unique stories that no other graveyard in this country has. And it is, I think that your point is really well taken, but what I would love to do would be to able to leave this with our director and ask her to work with the Historical Society, who already has a walking tour, has talked about incorporating these ideas into that, fits really, really well into that whole purposeful process that you talked about. And I would be willing to entertain that on several different levels, because I do think there is just a wealth of capacity to build there. But I really like the bylaw as it sits. I don't need to go over it anymore, but yeah, I hope that there's a space in between. But thank you for bringing the idea.
Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot, Councillor Wiley. Donna, is there any pressing need to get this done sooner rather than later?
Probably to go in line with the fees bylaw. There'll be some of it that would tie in together.
Yeah.
But that would be really one of the main reasons, yes.
Okay.
And also, nothing, I say pressing, but not pressing. It's pressing in the moment when somebody is in the process of wanting to be interred, or if a person is being interred in the cemetery. I'd mentioned that it is difficult to administer because there is a lot of loopholes, and yeah, but a lot of that loophole affects the finances of the cemetery, basically.
Yeah, and those are good points. So Councillor Wiley, I guess to Councillor Peterson's point, I do like the idea, and I like Councillor Peterson's suggestions as well. So to be honest, what I would prefer to do is to pass the bylaw, but then I also like the idea of bringing it back in the future to look at incorporating some of your idea and Councillor Peterson's idea. So I guess I'll vote against this, but if you want to make a motion after this to bring this back, I will certainly support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Mitzner.
Just a point of information, in Calgary, they do run movies in the cemeteries on October 31st.
So we have a motion on the floor. Counselor Wiley?
Sorry, but just if council could remember when we went through, for example, the traffic safety bylaw in committee of the whole, we had time item by item to sort of go through and just really like question like, what would this create? So for example, let me just give one here. If you go to, I'm on page 120. Sorry, I'm on page 119, which is section 3A. Now, this is just one example, but what it gives is an exact, maximum size that the gravestone is allowed to be, or under cremation plots, exact sizing. Now, some of this, again, I understand is it can't encroach on the other grave sites and so on and so forth, but you could actually write in a bylaw, it may not encroach. One point in here was, I think it was in the administration's summary, they said, well, the reason we're doing that is because, it levels the playing field of finances, so some people can afford better gravestones than others. But I'm like, why not? Why not allow individuals to make those kinds of decisions? So, I just would love to take the time and go through and talk about, is this really the direction that we want to go? 90% of this is fantastic. So I hear what Councillor Montgomery's saying, and I hate holding up operations. But there are just philosophical things that I don't actually think our council would be in favor of if we had time to go through it. So that's why I'd like to see it at a committee of the whole.
I appreciate your comments. I kind of echo Councillor Montgomery's. If we're looking at, the fees bylaw and the cemetery being part of that, we can revisit some of these things at a later date. So that's where I stand. Any other comments? Then I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Did you vote? Okay, all in favor of Councillor Wiley's motion? Opposed? And that motion is defeated. Is someone prepared to put a motion on for first reading? Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I move the council give first reading to bylaw number 23-31, being the cemetery bylaw.
You've all heard the motion. There's no discussion on first reading. All in favor? That motion is carried. Opposed, sorry. That motion is carried. Councillor Langmaid.
Get ready. Thank you very much, Your Worship. I would like to move the council give second reading to bylaw number 23-31, being the cemetery bylaw as amended, to delete section 6.2C, quote, a completed contract for burial, unquote. Second item is to add the following section 11, sale of plots of the bylaw as item 5. The town shall have the right to refuse to sell the use of more than 4 single plots or niches to any one individual or estate. And if I bothered anyone with niche, here's me saying niche. To add the following to section 11, sale of plots of the bylaw as item 6, the right to use any vacant space may be transferred upon approval from the cemetery coordinator, provided that A, the authorized representative signifies in writing to the town to transfer their rights to another person. B, the town is provided with the full particulars of the name, address, or other description of the person to whom such transfer is desired to be made. And C, after the transfer is implemented, any interment made in the plot shall be subject to interment fees as set in the fees bylaw.
Thank you for that motion. Now that we have a motion for second reading, is there discussion? Councillor Langmaid, do you want to speak to it? And then Councillor Montgomery?
If I might, just for a quick second, that was quite a long motion that I made, and just for the folks at home to know, these are amendments that came before us tonight and just needed to be read into the record. So those aren't amendments that I am proposing, and they're amendments that council is aware of. And I just want to mention, I want to give a shout out to Councillor Wiley. I appreciated, and I always appreciate people having enough time to consider what we are considering, because we are making decisions for an entire community, and it's okay to need more time sometimes. I know I prefer having a bit more time sometimes. In this particular case, just given the timeline, I think we were better served to tackle this sooner rather than later. But I do hope that we can get together for a more fulsome discussion on what do cemeteries look like now and in the future, and how do we use them as assets within our community? Because they can be really beautiful and interesting places, and I think they are really interesting and beautiful places. So I hope that we do have that conversation in the future, but I wasn't sure that right now is the time. So just some background on that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Montgomery and then Councillor Peterson.
Thank you. I would like to offer an amendment, and that I will move that we amend the section 13.12, or 13-12, whichever, 1312, just to remove one of the references to curbs. It's in there twice. That's it.
13.12.
13.12. Any comments on that amendment? Councillor Wiley?
Oh, sorry, not on that amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for an amendment to remove one of the words curb. Any discussion on that amendment? I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor? And opposed? Sorry, let's do that again so I see.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, may I ask some clarification on the
Sure.
motion, just to make sure, because I'm not entirely sure. So the motion is to just remove, is the motion to remove 13.12 or just the word curb?
Just one of the references to curbs. It's 1312.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not understanding, I think, Your Worship.
Okay.
Oh, there's two words. It's just an editorial. Oh, I get it.
Everybody clear now? It's an editorial, it's a removal of one of the words curb. Well, let's just make it okay. So Jonathan, do we need a motion then to amend that if we're looking at clearing up the wording?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. A motion was already made to edit it, so it's up to you if you would like to
Okay,
accept it.
so I'll call the question.
It is
All-
typographical.
All in favor? And that motion is carried. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just wanted to say that I really do appreciate the context and the depth of this bylaw. And one of the things that isn't noted in it's not an amendment, but one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting is that we talked about the Catholic section of the bylaw earlier today, but in the inclusionary understanding that this council has committed to and that our senior leadership team has adopted is that other faith groups or special groups will be considered by the town for space as well in this community graveyard. And the last thing I wanted to say about this is that I do believe that Councillor Wiley is going to get a full hearing because he understands how democracy works, and when it comes to unanimous consent, it's not going to happen, and then he's going to make a motion to bring it back to the committee of the whole. And it's a great beauty of democracy, so it is what it is, and I really have appreciated all of council's input, and especially our senior leadership into this.
So at this time, we have a motion that's been amended, and we have more discussion on the amended motion. Councillor Montgomery?
Jonathan, did you?
Jonathan?
Oh, okay. I just want to say thank you very much, Donna. Like you've obviously gone to a lot of work with this. You know, you transformed it basically. And the sensitivity you showed as well. You know, to try to kind of accommodate things and to make this kind of a good bylaw for for dealing with what it's dealing with. So I just want to say good job and thank you.
So Jonathan, just for clarification, if this doesn't get unanimous consent for third reading, it would come to us again on November 1st?
That is correct, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley?
So I have a process question. If there are some items on here, or many items on here, I just want to direct council's attention to and see if there's any will for amendment. How should I go about doing that? Or is that completely against procedure here? Like, there's a number of items on here I would like to draw attention to or just have further questions about. Can I just ask questions of admin about them, or?
When this comes back to us, it'll be coming back for third and final reading, is that correct? Because we probably won't pass unanimous consent for third reading tonight, but it will come back on the first for third reading. And is there discussion allowed at that point at third reading? I think we have allowed that before.
Yeah, you can ask questions at third reading. You can also make motions prior to third reading, but once third reading, you can't make amendments during the third reading, essentially.
Okay. Kevin?
Point of
Sorry.
clarification too, like we always have to have a amended copy in front of council. So if it comes to the next meeting and there's a bunch of amendments made and we can take we can either do a recess and do them, but if there are too many, then it has to come back at a future meeting, right? So we always got to have that copy for council to.
So this would probably be a good time to see if there's any appetite for some other amendments.
Can I ask a question for clarification, Your Worship?
Sure.
So it makes sense to me that Councillor Wiley has questions. Unanimous consent can stop this process, lack thereof. It could come back to the committee of the whole, to the next committee of the whole, for discussion, for ample discussion, like we have in many other considerations, and then it could come back for third and final reading. That would be an option.
That would be my preference.
Yeah. I think, Your Worship and Council,
Jonathan?
Council could decide to bring to a committee of the whole. However, just since we've already given second reading, and as CAO Scoble already mentioned, that we do have to make sure that each councilor has an opportunity to see the final version of the bylaw before third reading. It might be beneficial to have this discussion right now to see what sections of the bylaw you would like to see changes to, and then.
Jonathan, I don't have the meeting schedule that we worked on in today. When is the fees bylaw coming to us again?
Thank you, Worship. So the fees, there are a couple amendments to the fees bylaw that were mentioned when the fees bylaw was first brought to council. Right now, they're, I think, scheduled for November 15th, the third meeting in November, for council to consider that time, just because there are budgetary impacts that we'd like to have council have an opportunity to make sure that we're happy with the fees before the budget's finally approved.
Could the cemetery fees be in that fees bylaw?
Thank you, Worship Council. Yeah, I think they would be on the 15th if
Yeah, like,
if
let's
this bylaw
say
is passed.
this ends up at a committee of the whole on the 8th, then couldn't it still make it into the fees bylaw by the 15th?
Yeah, it really depends on how extensive those changes are to the bylaw too.
They're not.
There could be, sorry.
I think Liana has a comment and then CAO Scoble.
Administration would be prepared to make amendments to the cemetery fees bylaw on the 15th, depending on what comes out of the committee of the whole meeting. If they are significantly changed, I'm concerned I'm not going to have enough time to pull everything together, but we will have a draft already prepared from what administration is recommending. And we were planning on bringing this possibly to you guys as well for a discussion point on the 8th as well.
So personally, none of my amendments would have anything to do with fees.
CAO Scoble?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just to, Leanna said much of what I was going to say, but just keep in mind, if we approve something or something comes out of a committee of whole and council has an expectation that it comes back the next week, we've got like one business day to get it done, right? So not saying we can't do it, but I'm not going to make promises either. It depends on what comes out of that.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson?
So, Your Worship, no one in this council, to my understanding, has any concerns with the fees portion of the bylaw. So could we make an amendment? Would it be reasonable to make an amendment? And on the understanding of what Councillor Montgomery addressed earlier with our senior leadership, that this is a pressing matter, and we understand that. Councillor Wiley has acknowledged that. So is there any reason why we couldn't somehow amend this to pass the fees portion of the bylaw and then have the rest of it come back? Is that a possibility? Is it too cumbersome to be able to do that? Because if we could do that, we can address what our financial advisor is telling us. We could meet the context of what our operations is telling us, and we would still be able to address fully the councillor's concerns.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. Just to clarify, are you wondering if we could pass the bylaw today and bring the bylaw back at a committee of the whole for further discussion, or make amendments to the bylaw currently to kind of remove all of the sections that you're not ready to approve yet?
What I would like to do tonight is just move the fees portion of the bylaw, if that's rational.
So to do that, we would need to make a motion to essentially delete sections of the bylaw that aren't fees related, to be as just in one document. And then we would have to then, again, bring that final version to council for consideration of that bylaw.
Could we pass the amended bylaw of Councillor Montgomery? And then when it comes back to us, you've said we can discuss and make amendments at third reading.
Prior to third reading.
Prior to third meetings. Yeah, so when we come back, we can have discussion before the third and final reading vote. And that's where some of Councillor Wiley's amendments, so he would have to prepare between now and November 1st as far as what he'd like to see changed in the bylaw.
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. The only thing I would say is, according to the MGA Section 187.3, I think you have to see, each councillor has to see the entirety of the bylaw before third reading. So if there are changes made on November 1st, we would need to make sure that council gets to see what that final version of the bylaw looks like.
I think we have a lot of goodwill on this council as far as revisiting the bylaw. Could we not just pass this bylaw and then say, because the fees bylaw is very important and the cemetery fees is important as well, could we not just have an agreement to revisit this in the new year?
We'd have to suspend.
We'd have to suspend?
Well, could I make a suggestion?
Councillor Montgomery.
So, you know, I like Councillor Wiley's ideas, and I certainly want to hear him out on them. And I certainly support bringing this back to a committee of the whole. I'm cognizant of the kind of the time kind of crunches that we have going on, and with all due respect, of course, to Councillor Wiley, we could just, you know, let this die at unanimous consent tonight. We just vote it through at the November 1st meeting, and then, you know, with goodwill, of course, we bring it back for a more fulsome discussion, not at the next committee of the whole, because that would not work out. Well, I guess we would still be fine with the fees, but, you know, we could bring it back at a future committee of the whole, you know, and just pass it anyways, either tonight or on the 1st.
And that would allow our finance team and administration to proceed with the time situation. Liana?
I believe we actually have two very different issues here. We have the bylaw here on the cemetery, which is going to bring us in line with the Cemeteries Act and regulations. Then we have a separate bylaw that is going to come back with just the cemetery fees. So there's two separate bylaws. One, we are currently, it's very difficult to administer the cemetery with the current bylaw that we have. So this is why we brought this bylaw to you to have discussions on. That we're going to have a second bylaw coming to you, which is the fees portion for the cemetery.
I haven't read it in a while, but does the Cemeteries Act, does the Cemeteries Act speak to the different sizes and styles of monuments, do they start looking at uniformity as far as all across Alberta?
Thank you, Your Worship. They do not speak to sizing of monuments and such, and just more to Councillor Wiley's point of talking about uniformity. I don't think that's what we're trying to do at all. I think we've set a maximum size, and that was based on conversations with a few of our suppliers as well as the funeral home, saying they'd like to try and keep costs down for residents. So what's the maximum size we can give them? Within that sizing, as you'll see, there's really not a whole lot of, uniformity that's required. You can engrave what you like. You can have different shapes, you can have different colors. There's lots of availability that does not require uniformity.
I know my family's considering a statue of me, so. That's- Yeah, on a scooter. CAO Scoble.
So, I think we're speculating a lot here because I've heard there's amendments, a number of amendments, and the question is, do we go into them tonight or not go into them? But, to ask us, we don't know. Maybe it will change the fees. But, the fees are based on our cost of service as well, right? So, I guess at the end of the day, you could approve the fees bylaw as is, and then we can come back and amend the fees later with all these amendments. If they go through, we find out it's impacting the cost of service to provide it.
Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Let's throw more options out there with more questions. It's my understanding that the town of Strathmore is currently undergoing a level of service review of all of the services that we provide the community. CAO Scoble, is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. What I'm hearing is that this sounds, and without knowing your amendments, Councillor Wiley, so please understand, I'm making some assumptions here, but it sounds like the discussion is a little broader in terms of what services do we provide at our cemetery? What kind of functions do we expect to happen there? And how do we want that cemetery to serve our community? And I think that's a really important and good conversation to have. And I think that's a conversation that would align really well with the level of service review once it's ready to go, that we could tie those things together and talk about it kind of as a larger idea of what is the level of service we want to provide at our cemetery, rather than trying to maybe amend certain sections of the bylaw now to try and kind of shift it that way. Maybe we can have a more fulsome discussion and discuss it like that. I'm also very aware of our need to align with the Cemeteries Act, and that some of these changes are specifically to ensure that we are doing that. So I don't want to delay this and delay compliance, but I do see the value in the sort of conversation that Councillor Wiley, I think, is looking to have, and I would like to have that conversation. I think it might pair better with the level of service discussion and having a more wholesome review.
I feel much more reassured by your comments that we aren't pushing for uniformity, that there is still the option for various families to do a monument within certain science constraints. And I do understand from Councillor CAO Scoble that there could be impacts to the service costs if we stray. So I'm comfortable with the amended second reading that we have. Councillor Wiley.
Sure, so if I just kept it to a small number, could we look at number 1312, which is on page 125? So my route home takes me past the cemetery. I drive past there several times a day. When I drive by my cemetery, it's full of color. Now, maybe it's possible to see that as clutter. Maybe it's possible to see that as interfering with landscaping. What I see is people who have adorned the grave sites of the people they love with solar lights, with silk flowers, with vases. When I look at number 12, it's everything we're going to take away. So statues, benches, oversized decorations, metal objects, lights. There's toys at the cemetery. I understand there's a certain amount of cost associated with this, but this is what I'm talking about. It takes the cemetery, it whittles it down to just gravestones. And this is where, there's character, there's potential to be character in a cemetery. So that's one of the ones I have concerns about.
I guess my concern about removing this would be the pressure on staff to not cause damage to things that people have put outside of the cemetery plot, and they're running a lawnmower and they've got to go around lights, or they miss something and they hit it and damage it. Then there's that problem that we're going to be dealing with the public, because we know that people are really attached to their families, and if something gets damaged that they wanted really there all the time, it's going to be a problem.
But it's already in here that, we're not liable for any of damage.
No,
to
I'm just thinking
property.
that there's definitely going to be a PR problem and a problem for staff to have to go through answering phones from families if various things are put out and damaged at different times. It's going to be a problem.
And so another one might be on page 121, number 7 on page 121, right at the very top. If there's something that's deemed to be a safety hazard or it needs repair, that all means will be made to contact the who's ever taking care of it, but they're only given 1 month, for example. Like that, to me, that would be an easy one. Could we not change that to 3 months? I mean, what if you're a snowbird, you're down south, something happens, you've got 1 month to respond?
Your worship, if we're moving through these, just on a point of order, Councillor Wiley could just make the amendments, right? And we can vote on them as we go? Could that not happen?
I would have to turn to Jonathan, because we have an amended motion, so you'd be amending the amended motion. Is that the wording we'd be using?
I think we approved Councillor Montgomery's. Oh, right.
Jonathan, if Councillor Wiley wanted to suggest certain numbers to be removed, that would be an amendment to the amended motion?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So maybe I'll just read the motion that I have out loud just for everybody, for clarity. So that council gives second reading to bylaw number 2331, being the cemetery bylaw as amended to delete section 6.2C, a completed contract for burial, to add the following section to section 11, sale of plots of the bylaw as item 5. The town shall have the right to refuse to sell the use of more than 4 single plots or niches to any one individual or state, and to add the following to section 11, sale of plots to bylaw as item 6. The right to use any vacant space may be transferred upon approval from the cemetery coordinator, provided that the authorized representative signifies in writing to the town to transfer the rights to another person. The town provided with the full particulars of the name, address, or other description of the person to whom such a transfer is desired to be made, and after the transfer is implemented, any interment made in the plot shall be subjected to interment fees as set in the fees bylaw, and then to remove a reference to curbs in section 1312 of the bylaw. So that's the motion. I understand it's currently on the floor. Council has a couple options here. They can amend the second reading motion to include further amendments. You could pass the second reading motion with these amendments and then consider further amendments to the bylaw. That's up to council's
That would come
discretion.
on November 1st.
You can make those amendments tonight.
Tonight.
Consider those amendments tonight.
Okay.
I have a suggestion.
Yep.
What if we move forward and all we take out is section 1312, with the understanding that there are very reasonable things in there that administration should be concerned about, that it will be brought back up again at a future date as an amendment. So, because my concern is this gets passed, there are hundreds of items in that cemetery that would then be prohibited. There's a big kerfuffle. People need to remove things. And then as a council, we decide, actually, you know, the cemetery is more beautiful with all that extra. So I would propose this. We go ahead and pass this bylaw, but we remove section 1312 and bring it back, and administration bring it back at a future date, because obviously there's things in there that need to get addressed.
I would like to ask Donna, what would be the impact on you and your staff if 13.12 were removed from this bylaw?
Right now,
If it were suddenly not there.
if it wasn't ever put back in, it would become a problem. Where it's gonna be a problem is in the spring, when we start mowing, weed whipping. The other times it can be a bit of an issue is when we're doing an interment, have to get equipment across somebody's plot, and then there's a bunch of items in the way. But generally what we do is we remove them, try to put them back as best as possible, and then, so really the spring would be really when it would have the biggest impact on us, a little bit when it comes to interment.
Your worship? In terms of what was brought to us before on 1312, I think I heard you say that you were going to take a year, a full year, to make those changes. I know it doesn't address the fullness of Councillor Wiley's concern, but it is important that you are treating it with enormous sensitivity. And I think that graveyards are different in some ways, but similar also to highway memorials. And so they've come under some pretty strict restrictions. You know, there is an understanding in the Highways Act now that people need to grieve that, and they need to understand it, but they've put parameters around it that have kept it unique, but still safe and okay. So, but I respect Councillor Wiley's right to make the amendment.
I'm a little bit confused too, because we made amendments to the cemetery. We made suggestions for amendments to the cemetery bylaw, but we didn't do 13.12 at Committee of the Whole last week. And isn't Committee of the Whole the time when things like those things should come up versus when we're ready to pass the bylaw? Isn't that the way our process is
Yeah,
supposed to
so
go?
if you remember though, we got the cemetery's bylaw information just hours before the committee of the whole meeting. And so we went through them at the committee of the whole meeting, and at that time it seemed unremarkable.
Yeah.
But after thinking about it for a week, I would have preferred if we'd brought it back to another committee of the whole. But I have just two amendments then that I would be willing to make, and then we can move forward and council can decide what they think about them.
Okay.
So Jonathan, I'll make them separately?
It would be up to you, Councillor Wiley, but it's easier if they are separately, just for tracking.
Okay, so I'd like to make an amendment to the second reading that's amended.
Can I have a point of clarification? We can vote on the first one, and then you can make the amendments, right? Then we don't have to, like, we can do them all separately.
Thank you, Worship Council. Yeah, that's up to council. You can pass second reading now and then make those motions following that, or you could amend second reading to include these amendments. That's up to council's discussion.
I'm going to amend
Discretion.
second reading so that I feel like I can support second reading. So the first amendment I'd like to make is section 4.7. Regarding disrepair of markers and monuments. I would like to change it from holding it for 1 additional month to holding it for 3 additional months. If you were a snowbird and you were down south and something were to happen and maybe you're not checking your mail, maybe, 1 month is a very short amount of time to respond. So I think 3 months is a lot more reasonable. And I also don't think this probably comes up very often. So it's probably a small change for infrastructure.
So we have that amendment offered. Councillor Langmaid, did you want to speak to that amendment? to that?
No, sorry, I have
Okay.
my own
Okay,
minor
thanks.
amendment to make.
Councillor Montgomery.
So just for clarification, we're just changing the 30 to a 90 then?
I think it says 1 month. 30 days, it says. Oh, I don't have sorry, I'm looking at the one we received a week ago. Okay, so from 30 to 90.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, just for clarification, is it you're clarifying that last sentence, if no contact is made at the expiry of 1 month of removal, the town will dispose of the monument? Or is it,
Sorry, we have more than one cemetery document in front of me. I have to find the one.
If I was to clarify, I think you want us, once we remove it, you would like us to hold it for 3 months as opposed to 1 month.
Yeah,
Is
so
what I
it's almost the last sentence.
Yeah.
So I'll reread the sentence I want to amend. The town will remove the unsafe marker or monument and will hold it for, I wanted to say 3 additional months.
Can you just change it to 90 days?
For 3, no.
I think you may need to make, well, 2, you have to, because you have to change this. Will be provided 90 days to contact the town, and this you have to change to 3.
I think this means that if contact is made, they'll be given 3 months to deal with it.
That's correct.
The most current bylaw we have, 23-31, is the one that came to us tonight, correct, with the writing in blue?
Correct.
Because that one on 4.7 says 30 days.
Well, so there's 2 numbers. The second number says we'll hold for 1 additional month, and I'd like it to say 3 additional months.
For 1 month of removal.
Change the 1 month to 90 days.
Okay.
Do both, Dawn, and maybe I misunderstood, do both have to change?
No, because basically what it's saying, if there's no contact made, we're going to remove it. And originally, it would say we would hold it for 1 month, but if we make no contact, you would like it held for 90
Yeah,
days.
so if it's a safety risk, I'm in favor of it being removed in 30 days. Like, I get that, but the idea that we would then dispose it after only 1 month, that is very quick turnaround if you've got, something of value. Some of these are probably historically important, family important, and maybe financially important.
Okay, so that's the amendment then. Is there any further discussion on that amendment? Then I'll call the question. All in favor of that amendment? That motion is carried.
Okay, the second one then is, so item 1312.
And I think you want to speak further to it?
Yeah. So I understand that administration is going to need to bring this back to us because there are items on here that are very important that they need to deal with. Like, not all of these things can be left in the cemetery. So I totally understand that. But I just think for the sake of today, I would like to remove section 13.12 so that this bylaw can get passed tonight, that nothing will move forward in removing any of these items in the short term, and that the administration can bring this back to council. So my official motion, or my official amendment, is to remove section 13.12. And I guess, and I should finish, and have administration bring us back information on this for further discussion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Montgomery and then Councillor Mitzner.
It's just a question for administration. Like, this won't, I mean, like, obviously the rest of the bylaw is gonna have to be renumbered, I guess. And that's not gonna, like, that shouldn't cause any issues if we just kind of remove a section and then everything below gets renumbered.
Jonathan?
yeah, thank you, Your Worship Council. No, that'd be clerical, that we would be able to renumber if there's a deletion of a section.
Councillor Mitzner?
I feel that asking administration to bring this back to us, they brought this to us last week. We discussed number 12 last week. And it was explained to us the cost, the liability, and it's not usually done in any other cemeteries. I think we could leave this in here and put the date in, or like, I don't know, but I don't think we should remove the entire thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. CAO Scoble?
Well, I was just going to comment, this is a very difficult clause. There's probably no right or wrong to this, but, you know, the other way to look at it is the staff are going to have to move all these things. They're going to damage it. Some of these things are very personal things to people, and they don't want other people touching them, but now we have to touch them or not cut the grass. Like I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but it's a very difficult issue, and you know, it's whether if it's in, there's difficulties. If it's out, there's going to be difficulties.
Any further discussion on that amendment? Councillor
Yeah, but
Wiley?
This is the item I think we really need to focus on and discuss. Like, what is our vision of this cemetery? Is it plain? Is it dull? Is it just headstones and grass? These are the items that I think we could do a much better job of trying to create an atmosphere that is unique and diverse and exciting, just like this community that we're in. So I would feel very good about passing this bylaw tonight if just this one item was removed.
Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, in the last year and a bit, I've been in, I was counting them up, 12 different cemeteries, and including our own. And I understand people's need to grieve in ways that are meaningful to them. But I also understand, I've also witnessed in graveyards that don't have capacity or parameters, the detritus that can come as a result. And I'm not talking about the things that people are putting on graves. I'm talking about chunks of sod and rock and things that can't be moved and all those kinds of things that happen in the transfer and process of trying to bury a loved one. So I'm not in favor of moving it, and it makes me really sad that we can't pass the bylaw tonight, but I'm not prepared to remove this, because I think there are score of ways that we can make our graveyard what Councillor Wiley envisions without making life more difficult for our staff and making life more difficult for the people that have to work in this environment.
I'm not in favor of removing this either. I just think there's far too much risk for our staff to damage things that people leave. If we leave it wide open to what people want to put there, Strathmore is a very windy place. A lot of storms roll through. What we might hope to be seen as very eclectic and lots of different styles of things set out, it could become very, very junky looking. And again, I worry about staff causing damage, and the point about having to bring in equipment to do interments and burials where you possibly could damage things left out. I think it puts us in puts the cemetery and the staff in a very bad situation. So I will not be in support of this. Councillor Wiley?
Just to be clear, if we take 12 out, it doesn't change anything from the way it currently is. Currently, there are benches and solar lights and silk flowers, so it doesn't change anything. It just leaves it how it is, so that it gives us some time before spring to discuss this again, which was part of my amendment, was that administration would bring this back for further discussion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other discussion? So we'll be voting on the amendment to remove 13.12. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion is defeated. Are there any further amendments, Councillor Wiley, that you wanted to put in or bring in or suggest?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I might offer a friendly clerical amendment. So I'm not sure this, we can vote on this if you guys want to. I noticed that there's an extra U in honor at number 10 here. Hauner. And then in the same category on number 6, we're missing the U in honor. So we had a U go stray. That's all. If we would like to vote on this, we can, but I think it's fairly straightforward and I consider it friendly. It happens.
So at this point in time, we have Councillor Montgomery's amended motion for second reading. Is that where we are? Langmaid's. Okay, so that's on the floor now. Is there further discussion on that amended motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? And the motion is carried. Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I'd move that council give unanimous consent to proceed with third and final reading of bylaw number 23-31, being the cemetery bylaw.
All in favor? And opposed? Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. So Jonathan, this will come back to us on November 1st?
That's correct, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move, thank you, Donna, for all your time and efforts, and your staff as well. 10.2, Property Tax Penalty and Monthly Tax Installment Payment Plan Bylaw number 23-30, page 130. And, oh, Tom, thank you, Tom. Good evening. You're with us. You're in an undisclosed location again?
Yes, I am, Mayor.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I just put a little food in my mouth. The last discussion was going on for quite a while. I got a little hungry, so I'll talk, or I'll just give a brief rundown on the bylaw that you have in front of you. So the current bylaw that's in place has been in place since 2011. The new bylaw changes basically the tax penalty component. It leaves the tax installment plan primarily the same. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I guess I just want to kind of highlight kind of the key things what the bylaw achieves and what we're trying to change from the current one. And I think the first point is simplification of the process for administering and levying property tax penalties. The current bylaw is very confusing. Going to the new bylaw presents consistency to the bylaw, where we're going to a monthly penalty process and a consistent tax penalty rate of 2%. And that's similar to what you'd see in our utility penalty and what you'd see in business, credit cards, corporations, what they would charge. So we just want to kind of bring it up to current standards. We also want to bring some fairness and equity to the rate structure. The current rate structure is kind of the percentages change depending on the month. The months are kind of variable throughout the year. So we're just trying to bring some consistency by having on a monthly basis a 2% rate, which works at 24% annually, which is comparable to maybe what your credit card or other lenders or whatever you'd be paying on credit would be charging. I also think that we're trying to make the system more fair for the taxpayer, where currently the tax rate for the first 9 months, if you're behind, works up to 36%. That makes it difficult for ratepayers to stay on top and stay current with your taxes. So I think everybody wants to pay their taxes. Nobody wants to be in arrears, but I think to provide a more fair and equitable tax penalty rate throughout the year will just help taxpayers and residents hopefully stay on top and be able to pay their taxes on time or more quickly if they're behind. And the last thing is, I think just a little bit on the challenges that this administration's had with this bylaw in the past, where if a resident or business misses the tax due date of June 30th, that they, right off the get-go, get hit with a 10% penalty, which in a lot of cases is a significant amount of dollars. And we've seen that this past summer, after the due date, somebody missed tax penalty. Unfortunately, we have to apply the rate because that's how the bylaw is. And we've seen a lot of like frustration, anger, and I think a lot of probably I guess financial strain on stress and anxiety on people when that occurs. So I guess we're just trying to alleviate some of that for our staff and also for council, that they're getting less residents coming before council asking for a reduction if they miss a payment and they want a tax relief from council. And just finally on the TIPS program, the tax installment program, that's been a huge success. That was something that was brought into place in most municipalities in Alberta probably about 20, 25 years ago, probably late 90s when that first came into place. And we probably have about 60% or greater of our taxpayers that take advantage of the TIPS program. So that's been a great success. It keeps people caught up on their taxes. I think the tax percentages I see now for outstanding taxes is a lot less than say 25 years ago. And I think it's due to the tax installment program where people can make monthly payments, and that's a lot more manageable for people to budget and to stay current. So we're not proposing any changes to that. It's been a great success. So that's kind of the overview of the bylaw, and the changes that we're making is on the rate structure and for the tax penalty and on the timelines for when we charge it. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I really like the consistency, and with these tough economic times, I think this is a really good help for residents in town. Councillor Montgomery and then Councillor Wiley.
All right. Councillor Wiley, you have
I have a question.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Okay, so before the motion, I guess just, I want to clarify, so this is a math question I probably should have gotten when I was in grade 6, but at 2% then penalty a month, that works out to annually, you said 24% a year.
Yeah, so generally 24%, 2% times
Okay.
12, 24%.
Perfect. I just wanted to hear that again. Thank you.
Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move that council give first reading to bylaw number 23-30, being the property tax penalty and monthly tax installment payment plan.
Thank you. All in favor? That motion is carried. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move that council give second reading to bylaw number 23-30. Blah, 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 blah.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. Are you okay with that, Jonathan? And we see it all in front of us as well. Any discussion on that motion for second reading?
I just want to say thank you very much. Well, to the whole administration, actually. This is what I call being proactive. This is looking for ways to make. Yeah, we're not here to gouge people. We're not here to put people out of their homes. And so I just really appreciate administration being proactive and bringing this forward to help our residents. So thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor for second reading. All in favor? That motion is carried. Councillor Wiley.
I move that council give unanimous consent to proceed with the third and final reading of bylaw number 2330, being the property tax penalty and monthly tax installment payment plan.
All in favor?
Oh, yeah.
And that motion is carried. Councillor Wiley.
Sure. The council give third and final reading to bylaw 2330, being the property tax penalty and monthly tax installment payment plan. And I also just want to thank administration for this. This is excellent. And as I was reading it, I was just so pleased with everything in it. So thank you.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. We move now to item 11, councillor information and inquiries. 11.1, questions between councillors and council statements. Anything tonight?
Can I bring up these ones, Doctor?
Sure, I think you could.
I have no request for action on any of these, but I wanted to just bring them to our senior leadership attention. These were just, I'd asked a question as to whether or not they should come through a citizen forum, a citizen communication forum. But it was just a citizen that talked about the flat stones in the pathway in Grays Park were very, very slippery, and sometimes people slipped off them because they're quite far apart. And they just said, you know, if there was some extra rocks kicking around that they could throw in, that would help. And then the other concern was about Dinosaur Hill, and just, you know, it's the old, can they put bales on both sides of the fence? They're worried about kids being hurt by the snow fence. And that was all I had. And if you want me to do something different, I'm happy to do that, but those were just recent.
Thank you. 11.2, boards and committee reports. Seeing and hearing none. 11.3, question and answer period. What burning questions do you have? Nothing. 11.4, administrative inquiries. Do we have any tonight, Jonathan? Then we'll move along. 11.5, any notices of motion? Then at this time, we're looking for a motion to go back in camera. Councillor Peterson?
Your worship, I would move that council go in camera at 8:53 p.m. On agenda item 13.1.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion is carried.